Welcome to step 3 of our learning to write lessons for the literacy primer. And this step 3 is write the story. And you can see here just a lesson 1 from the Tsuvati primer, just with our basic literacy literacy lesson format. So it's very important to think about a story. You want it to sound natural. You want it to be as interesting or amusing as possible for the adult learner, not childlike topics. You want connected sentences. You want it to have meaning together, not just random sentences thrown together. And we're going to have a limit of the number of new words in each lesson, which will make it easier for the new readers. We'll be talking a lot more about that in a future video. And you're going to gradually increase the number of sentences per lesson to make it easy as a stepping stone for the new reader. So in your primer manual, there's a chart that shows you the number of sentences per lesson. And so from lesson 1, we want to have 2 or 3 sentences. Lesson 2, we can have 3 or 4 sentences in our story. Lesson 3, 3 or 4, and you can see gradually we're just going to each lesson increase the amount of story material by 1 sentence. And early on, you want these sentences to be simple sentences, not very complex sentences. But then later on, you can have more complex sentences. Then in lesson 12, we'll be talking more about this in another video. We're going to split the number of sentences between having a portion of it being a Bible story related, and a portion of it can just be about the new words or the new topic. So who writes the stories? Remember that the primer construction process is a collaboration between the local language speakers and the LAI facilitators. So the language speakers are going to write the stories. They are the language experts. We are not the experts, but they have the language. They know their language. Now, the facilitator can assist with the mechanics of writing simple stories or helping them to think through subjects that they might want to use, that kind of thing. But the writers are the ones who will tell you if it's correct in their language. But it's important as the facilitator to get a back translation of the story to kind of make sure that the general meaning is okay. If you have any questions, you can talk about that with the writers. For instance, when we were doing one of the languages in Ghana early on, one of my first ones, the picture word was spider. And the story came back and the spider was singing and dancing and doing all these kinds and talking. And I went back to them and I said, wait a minute, spiders don't sing and dance and talk. But apparently this spider, Ananasi, is a character in their folk stories and is very predominant as singing and dancing and talking. Is just kind of a general character. So within that context, the story made perfect sense. So it's good to go back and look at it, question it, making sure that it will be good for the new readers. So how do they write the stories? So they're going to use the 2 picture words for the lesson, and you want them to be used twice in the story if possible. Sometimes early on it's not possible, but later on it is. And you want to use words that are available from previous lessons for review. So try and keep revising those older words. You're going to be using new words made up from letters that are taught so far, but also new words including the new letter for that lesson plus any old letters. You can use verbs or adjectives, nouns, pronouns, just whatever makes names, whatever makes good story. You want the writers to stay within the limit of new words. Like I said, we'll talk more about that later. You're going to write the number of sentences in the story for the lesson, as we had indicated a few slides back from the chart in your primer guide. And you want to encourage them to repeat former grammatical structures with new content words. This will help the new reader tremendously when they've seen that. So you can say, the ball is red. And maybe then the next one you have, the truck is green. Mother sells the meat at the market. John sells the ball at the market. So those kinds of things, then the new reader has the grammatical structure they're familiar with, but then they just have the new content words. So here are some examples from the Tsuvadi primer from Nigeria. So this is lesson 1 that we have here. And you can see these are our new letters that have been introduced. We've talked about that. And our 2 picture words, Malala, which is a goat, or a lamb, no, goat, and Ululuhu, which is the door. Remember, we talked about the footprint of the words, and you can see those here. Our other new words are Lami and Ma, which is an U. So we have a total of 5 words in this lesson, one of them being just a letter. These are possessive markers in the language. So this particular lesson, we have our 2 sentences, full sentences, and the rough English translation is the goat is Lami's and the door is Lami's. Now, granted, this isn't exactly the most active, enticing, invigorating literature yet, but it's a start. And for the new reader, it's just tremendously exciting to be able to read something in their language that they've never been able to read before. So this is lesson 2 of the Tsuvadi. Notice we introduced the letter N, and we have our picture words, Inaha, which means cattle, which is plural, and the Hahina, which is the fire. So we've introduced our 2 picture words and 2 other new words. We have 4 sentences in this case, and these sentences are the cattle are Lamis, the cattle are Lumas, Lumas and other names. The cattle are in the bush, that's the word for bush. The fire is in the bush. Now, may sound fairly simple to us, but if you think about, for the new reader, they're cattle farmers, and the cattle are in the bush. And if they hear fire is also in the bush, like a bushfire, that can be a very dramatic story, even with simple 4 sentences. Now we continue on that way, building sentence by sentence by sentence. And here in lesson 12, we're introducing the name Jesus. We talked about that. And also we're introducing the word children in this case. And you can see here, our story is much more involved. And this is where we are going to begin to split or add our Bible content. And we'll talk more about in the next video exactly how you do that and possibilities of how you can do that. But in this case, I just want to talk about the Bible content. It can be very simple. In this case, we only have 4 sentences, but it's something that is going to relate to a verse or verses, a passage in the Bible. And this one talks about, this is a very rough translation, Jesus is on the path. And the children come to see Jesus. And the children see Jesus. And Jesus welcomes the children, or something to that effect. And so then we related with that Matthew 19:13, where Jesus blesses the children. And so it's a very simple story, but it can be very powerful and evocative when it's related to the Bible passage. Then in lesson 27, you can see here that we've got, once again, this is still the Tsubati, how much more content we have, and that we now have the indentation of the sentences. We've got them written into paragraphs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in another video, about how you write them out. But here we have the book in stars, and we have the story talking about that the teacher is teaching from the book, and he's teaching about the stars, and he takes the children out, and they talk about the stars there. And then we have another little paragraph here that is Lami talking to the chief, and he has an expletive, "Look, the sheep are in my field." And then they move the sheep back to the other field. And then the sheep come back. And Lami says to Mali, "Look, the sheep are back." And Mali is very upset, and he goes to the chief and he says, "The sheep are in my field." So this is a very evocative for the herders. And they said, I asked them, "Does this happen a lot?" Oh, they said, "Oh, it happens all the time." So this is something that was very common to the people, and very. But notice we have these these words that are just emotive words. They don't really have meaning, and they're not bad words. They're just emotive words that are used in the language. And then for the Bible story, we have we wanted to introduce the I am statement. So we have Jesus is on the path, and then Jesus is teaching, and Jesus says, "I am the path," and that's the word that they use for "I am the way," like "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And then we have that scripture reference from John chapter 14, verse 6. Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And so then that provides an opportunity for the witness section of the lesson. So kinds of things you want to include, and have the writers include in their primer stories, and you can help them by sharing some of this with them. There's different types of sentences, statements, commands, questions, dialogues, different verb tenses, present, past, future, both men's and women's activities. It's very important if you have a whole group of men that you make sure they include women's activities as well, or vice versa. You want to use theme that the primer construction team considers important in their community. And sometimes at the beginning of a primer workshop, I will ask them, what kinds of topics do you think are important for your community? So one primer language we were doing in Ethiopia is we asked a team that they wanted to write about child marriage. They wanted to write about the problem of cigarettes and gat, which is a leaf that they chew, which is kind of like a narcotic leaf. They wanted to write about abduction of women. They wanted to write about good marriage. And so they had a whole bunch of things. So we worked those into the primer stories. Very simplified, but you still get the basic things there. You want to introduce people's names as early as possible, and this adds interest to the stories. Like we had Lami and Luma early on, and then we had the teacher, and we had the children. So you want to just those relationship words such as mother, father, brother, sister, just that help people relate to the stories. You also want to include many words as possible early on from the Bible story words that are listed in the language data worksheet. And this will help you a lot when you get to the new word control for the now 36 Bible stories. So exactly how are you going to work with your team to get them writing lessons? Well, we recommend for the first 5 or 6 lessons, you basically almost have a writer's workshop going on. That you, like for the first lesson especially, you'd have them take the 2 picture words and you have them just write sentences that they can make with those letters and those words. And then you as a facilitator will help the team choose the 2 sentences that they like for that first picture word. And you can write the sentences on the board, and then they will all, as a group, decide on the best sentences to make a story for the lesson. As a facilitator, maybe you've got a couple of different sentences that aren't necessarily the best in and of themselves, but you can help them to rework those to something that's a little more cohesive as a story. So they begin to get the idea of how you can write simple stories. And you continue this writing process for the next 5 or 6 lessons, as we said. So it's a whole group effort. So hopefully you have 5 to 8 people on your primer team, and that they're all working together to write these stories. You're teaching them how to limit the number of new words. You're helping them to pick some good topics. One of the things we often tell the teams is, be very careful what verbs you pick in those first few lessons, because you're going to be using those a lot. So sometimes they can get the word kill for lesson 1, with the letters they have. So, Lami killed the dog or something like that. And we try not to do that, because as soon as you start killing stuff, you're going to be killing everything. And we really don't want the primers to be focused on that topic so much. Well, later on, you can use that word, but just probably not in the first few lessons. So anyway, just kind of watch that, and just know that those are kind of hard to get the stories going and get that idea story, but you can do it. And it's good to try that. After lesson 6, to be able, because normally we try and do this in like a 2-week period to write all 82 lessons. To do that, we have to split the writers into 2 groups, maybe 3, if depending on how many writers you have. But you have to be a little careful with 3 groups, because it's easy to get the new word control really messed up. But you're going to have each group write the story for a different lesson. So if you have 2 groups, one group might be working on lesson 7, while the next group's working on lesson 8. But once again, they still need to collaborate, because the lesson 8 group will be able to use the words that are new in lesson 7 as old words in their lesson. So with that bit of instruction, let's try it. And so you can go into on your assignment in your thing. There is a PDF of this assignment, and basically what you're going to do is lessons. This is going to be writing lesson 4 in English, and our new letters have already been chosen for us. These are the new letters that are in English, and the picture words are bed and hen. And the other new words that are in the story, they've already been chosen for us, are cook, egg, got, and sick. And just a hint, you can only use those forms of the word, okay? Now, these other words you have here from lessons 1 to 3 of the English primer, and these are words that were in the pre-reader and are available to you. So once again, only the forms that are here are available to you. So what I'd like you to do is you're going to write a simple story of 6 or 7 sentences, remembering our criteria, and wanting to use the picture words at least twice in the story, plus the 4 other new words. And plus you want to use some of the old words as well. So once you've written your story, you can post it in the class comments, and we can all kind of look at each other's stories and comment on them and talk about them in our video call. All right. Happy writing.